My guest today is Shannon Rowan. She has a Bachelor in Fine Arts. She had a career as a professional photographer. She's an artist, a musician, an illustrator of children's books, and a writer. She's published 2 books, is working on a third, and I'm really excited to have her here today to talk about a book that was published last year called WIFI Refugee, Plight of the Modern Canary. Welcome, Shannon. Glad to have you.
Thank you, Keith. Thanks for having me on.
Yeah. So this is going to be a pleasure today. We had a few minutes to talk before we got started here, and it's kind of a unique opportunity for both of us because when I speak to groups, and I know when you speak to groups, it's often people who don't get what EMF sensitivity, electrohypersensitivity, or as I just call it, electromagnetic poisoning. They don't get what it is, or that it is a real thing, and that's not an issue for either one of us. So I've been affected in that way, and you've been affected in that way, obviously, based on the book that you've read. So this is going to be a neat opportunity for 2 people who are surviving this type of poisoning. And I say surviving because the poisoning continues. So I think from that perspective, it's going to be a lot of fun. And we'll be talking to the people who realize that their health has been affected, whether they call themselves EHS, electrically sensitive, hypersensitive, whatever it is. Those are the folks that we're going to be trying to reach today. So I'd like to start with something that I see in the people that I work with. We're all sort of traveling along, if you will, flying through the air, sort of metaphorically, in an airplane, 30,000-foot level, flying north for one person, 25,000 feet flying east for another person. We've all got sort of this different altitude, different trajectory, different things that we're about in life, but we're flying along, and things are good and things are stable. And then when it comes to this electromagnetic poisoning, something happens. Some of us fall out of the sky. Some of us need to make an emergency landing. Some of us need to make a radical detour. And I wonder if, just to get started here, we could hear a little bit about your journey when you first became aware that electromagnetic forces were having an impact in your life.
Sure. Yeah. And I want to start by saying that I was a kind of health conscious person, so kind of a pretty high level of awareness of my body and health, and eating organic foods, and into herbal medicines and taking supplements and exercising. And I had already been suffering kind of mysterious issues, chronic problems for some time, and always just on this journey of trying to figure out what's going on. But I had found a sort of equilibrium, if you will, or felt, I was okay, maybe not great, but like a lot of people, I'm okay. I don't have cancer, whatever. I'm able to walk, I'm doing things. But and I'd actually been a resistor to smartphones, not for any awareness of the EMF problem or political things, not even about surveillance, only because it was expensive. And I, like I said, I was a professional photographer. I wasn't at the time. This was 2014. So I got my smartphone in 2012 because it became affordable, right? So it wasn't any more than what I was paying. And I really wanted it mostly for these the photo functions. Kind of could do some cool things that I used to spend hours in the darkroom trying to achieve, years before. So I finally got one. I was excited about it, actually. So I was not a resistor to the technology. I didn't have Wi-Fi at home just because I didn't want to pay extra for that. So I always had the cable internet. That was the cheapest. I had my my cable phone with the internet. But there was always Wi-Fi from the neighbors. I was in the city. I was in Washington, D.C. I had neighbors below me with Wi-Fi, neighbors next to me with Wi-Fi, neighbors down, Wi-Fi everywhere. I was in a kind of, we were talking before we got on about a wrinkle, where there's a wrinkle in the earth, you were calling it, where it's I was actually a little lucky. There was not a dead zone for cell phones, but it was spotty reception. and there were towers all over the place, but they weren't like, we had a little bit of a, and in fact, the park right across from me was like, there was actually a couple dead, so-called dead zones, which is where ironically most of the life can thrive. So it's all like backwards, this
Right,
labeling of everything. Um, so I was like actually in a decent spot, and that without knowing it. And maybe I would have been worse before this, this is why I'm bringing it up. But and then it was, so the same year the smart meters went on my house, which was a apartment complex, a big house with like 3 apartments in it. And I was in the top one, and there were the bank of meters like right under my porch. And I didn't know they'd gone in because I guess they sent something in the mail, small print, whatever. So I had no idea. So I'm actually like no idea this is going on. I've got my smartphone, I'm doing all this stuff, and I'm just like starting to notice that it was really after and I wrote this in my book, but I went to Bali on a trip, and it was a long flight, like that's the other side of the world, whatever. And the interesting thing about being there, I was on a retreat I was doing hula hoop dancing. So it was like I know, it was like a random thing I got into, and I was doing it like on a professional level, actually teaching, and sometimes doing shows, like performances. So I went to this retreat, and I actually noticed I was sleeping. I had been having insomnia for pretty much since the smart meters went on, so I didn't know that. So since this is what happened, smart meters go on, I start having insomnia. I have night sweats, and I'm still not menopausal, so it's not menopause. And this was in 2014, right? Okay, it's like almost 10 years ago.
Wow.
So I was having crazy night sweats. By the way, a lot of the doctors now are trying to tell people that are going through having EMF poisoning, that are women in their 40s, that they're perimenopausal, right? So now there's like a new term for like, oh, you're getting early menopause symptoms, and that kind of thing. So anyway, I'm like having these problems. I started having joint pain that was really mysterious to me. So those 2 years were like, I was suffering gradually, and it was like, but I hadn't made the connection. And the trip to Bali helped me become aware of that, because I couldn't understand why I was sleeping better there. Especially because they were burning trash, and I have asthma, like not horrible asthma, but it's triggered by stuff like trash burning. And I was having this horrible bronchial reaction and like coughing in the middle of the night when they would really start burning at night in the middle, and it would wake me up. But I still felt more refreshed than I had in years when I woke up. And I actually somehow figured out, I was like, there's no Wi-Fi here. Like just something hit me, with that, like there's no Wi-Fi here, and I don't really have like cell phone reception or anything. So I wonder, and it just kind of stored it away for later, and it was the trip back that was where I didn't get to stop anywhere. And it was 30 hours consecutive in airplanes and airports. And I came back and I just had like adrenal collapse almost, like I was in bed for like a week. I don't remember it almost. My partner was really worried about me. I couldn't like get up, And when I did get up, I started to notice this awareness, right? Like, and maybe it was the contrast or the extra poisoning that tipped me over the edge. I don't really know, except I had always noticed the cell phone bothered me. I actually knew that it bothered me before this, because it caused heating in my ear and my head. And the more, when I started talking to people about this, oh, lots of people feel that. Oh yeah, that does that to me too. But like a lot of people, I just ignored it and kind of like push through that. We learn to like push through pain. That's kind of our training, especially in our culture. Ignore pain, like don't complain about things, like just do it, do your job, whatever. I was working as a photojournalist before and in commercial photography, and I was taught to never complain, to work for 12, 20 hours straight. Don't eat, like, you just put that aside. You push the hunger away, you push the thirst away, and you get through it. And that was kind of my attitude. And it wasn't a helpful attitude or a healthy one. And that's what gets most of us in trouble, because we ignore these signals for so long and get used to completely ignoring our bodies for so many years. And then we go, oh, I have cancer. Where'd that come from? So I finally was like, whoa, this cell phone is really hurting now. Like it was hurting before a little bit, but now it's like really hurting, like so bad that I just remember standing there and holding the phone in my hand, and I was just texting, and I was like, this is really bothering my hand. It's like this weird electrocution feeling. It's going through my arm. I do like a 2-minute text or, even less. And I put the phone down and my arm would just be having this weird sensation in it for like an hour after. And I remember thinking, why am I ignoring this? Like, this is crazy. Like, this doesn't feel good. I got to do something about it. So I started to look into this. I just started to research online, like what's going on with this, like, I don't know what I first entered, like cell phone pain or something,
Right.
And I found out about this like supposed electrosensitivity. And I also started to notice like because they started putting Wi-Fi everywhere, like in the stores. It actually wasn't until around that time, like 2014, that the shops started to offer free Wi-Fi everywhere. And it was my co-op, my food co-op I'd been a member of for 12 years. And I worked there for 4 years. And I couldn't shop there anymore, barely, because I just went in and I feel this pressure in my body and my chest would hurt. And I get this pain in my chest and I couldn't think anymore. I mean, I started noticing I couldn't like form sentences, like words jumbled up, and a lot of my friends were having the same problems: cognitive dysfunction, insomnia. Like all my friends were insomniacs. The worst one with the memory problems she'd been having for years had 2 cell phones, like one personal, one for work. She carried them both on her body, like in her, pockets, and like had them all the time. My friends slept with insomnia, slept with their phones. They admitted to like hearing alerts on Facebook, waking them at 3 a.m. and they'd get up and check it. They couldn't help checking it. I mean, so I wasn't the only person suffering with these things, is what I'm trying to say, but I started making a connection. And as a result, I decided to do experiments. I'm like, well, let's see if I can find a place without cell phone reception and, get away from my electronics. And actually, no, I hadn't even noticed the cell towers. Like people I realized didn't notice cell towers. They didn't know what they even looked like. And they didn't notice antennas. And I'm like, oh, they're everywhere. So then you're like, oh, I'm trying to get away from this. And I thought, oh, this will be an easy solution. I'll move outside the city, commute in or something, And then I'm like, maybe I just need to sleep away from it, or I just like at first it was going to be an easier thing, and it just got harder, and and I realized like the impact it was actually having, and how hard it was to get away, and how hard it was to recover. The whole thing changed. But yeah, there were huge 100-foot tower in some cases, and I was like, oh, and like my partner didn't know either. Oh, that's a cell tower, right? So then we like, okay, well, we were fortunate that the Shenandoah National Park wasn't too far, a couple hours drive. And that actually, there were these cabins you could rent with the Appalachian Trail Club. And, you could get completely no electricity, no cell phone coverage at all, and no neighbors or anything, and go, and not very expensive, like have a few nights in those cabins. So we like started to do that as much as we could. We'd go on the weekends, and I immediately felt so much better, like amazing, and not just because I'm in nature. I mean, people excuse it. They go, oh, I'm in nature, of course I feel better. Well, yeah, I mean, nature makes us feel better. That's part of it. It's important to notice that. But why is it making you feel better, right? And in some cases, nature doesn't make you feel better if nature has been completely polluted and overrun with cell towers and Wi-Fi, campgrounds with Wi-Fi and everything. So at the time, they hadn't really like trend of like Wi-Fi campgrounds hadn't taken off too much yet. So, but we were not going to campgrounds because people bring their stuff, and but we went to these cabins, and it wasn't just that like I was sleeping better and that I was like thinking better. I felt like youthful, and joyful and like playful and happy, and like these things I forgot about. I think people just forget what it feels like. You don't have a way to test that anymore. Most people can't get a way to know, like the new normal is like feeling horrible and coping with that, and even though I live in a pretty good place now, naturally and everything, I don't think it's like, there's definitely a difference between, I mean, we're in a wrinkle actually here too, as you call it, there is a tower in our woods here. Unfortunately, they're everywhere, honestly, but we are in a low part of it. We're in this little valley where we don't get any signal. Sometimes there's pulsing, there's just stuff like, and you don't know if there's military things going on, whatever. But when you've found a spot that's like really pristine because you feel so happy. and I would like laugh in my sleep. Like I start sleeping, like dreaming and laughing,
Yeah.
like waking up
Yeah.
laughing, you know,
Yeah.
and that's really hard to come by. And I, sadly, you know, so I'm saying it's out there, but I don't know, it's not been a place we've found that we can live yet. Or even ourselves, you know, even where we are now. So we do compromise. I mean, we ended up compromising a lot of things along this journey just to get to the best thing we could find. You know, I mean, we're doing the best we can, and I'm a lot better, but I still have chronic things I deal with my body, and because I still get exposed to this, like you said, it's like, you know, we're always being poisoned. So it's about mitigating the poison as much as we can and recovering as much as we can and reducing it as much as we can. And that's all we can do. And it's still great because, you know, I mean, I have a lot of hope now. I feel a lot better. I was miserable. I mean, I started having migraines, you know, so when we were in the city, I couldn't do it anymore because I was so miserable. You know, I mean, I was tortured. And we built a Faraday cage around the bed. Sam did. He did a lot for me. I don't know where I'd be without him, to be honest. I can't imagine having gone through that myself. It was already really hard enough. And especially not being believed and people not really taking it that seriously. Because even now, this is almost 10 years later, I have close friends and stuff. It's like it's not that they don't believe me, but they still think it's my problem and not their problem. And they don't think it's related to their anxiety and depression and insomnia and chronic fatigue and arthritis and, you know, everything else they're dealing with. They just don't think it's related. And so it's disheartening sometimes that like they haven't actually made any changes in their lives to reduce their own use and like exposure to this, or for their children or their grandchildren. You know, so it's like I say what I can do. I mean, I say what I can, I do what I can. And at some point though, it's like people make their own decisions. You can't make it for them. And I'm not gonna force it down, you know, down people's throats. And I'll still be friends with my friends and my family. But it's just hard because, you know, you feel like it's demoralizing sometimes. You know, you're already having enough hard enough time with this. And I was pretty naive at first. I thought, oh, people just need to know about it and then they'll make changes. I'll just start telling people.
Right.
It wasn't really welcome news. I can
No.
tell you that. And because you realize how much people are addicted to it. Like they're so addicted that that's the last thing I want to hear. They'll hate you. They'll shoot the messenger, you know? I was not a popular person when I started opening my mouth back then, you know, I went to town council meetings. Like I was thinking, we'll take down all these antennas. Everybody will be happy. Let's get rid of it. You know, I'll
Yeah.
stop the smart meters. I'll get the smart meters off. I'll get the Wi-Fi out of the store and get people to stop using cell phones. And I had all this amazing ideas about it, you know, how it's going to be so great. But no, I wasn't like, people have known about this for decades. People have been fighting this for decades. I wasn't just because I just learned about it, you know, like it's not like people didn't know.
Yeah. So, wow, there is so much great stuff in what that you just said. Not that it was great as an experience for you to go to,
Right.
but I'm talking about being able to help others who have been poisoned in this way. Because really, I think right now, and I don't know if you'd agree with this or not, but we live or die depending on what we believe, perhaps more so than any other time in history. And imagine if you never had that insight when you were in Valley that, hey, I feel better here. They're burning garbage. I shouldn't feel better. What's different? And that curiosity is something I see in all of my clients that have electromagnetic poisoning. They, at some point in their life, they got curious and they said, it's better this way and it's worse that way. What is, no, it's the router, or, oh, it's my cell phone, or, oh, it's, and so that came through so clearly in what you were just talking about. That's wonderful. And the ability you then were able to use as a tool, this getting away to nature and a more pristine environment. And I think that is so critical that people be able to do that because, and I love what you said about it's a sort of formula here where in this crazy new world that we're living in, until everybody regains their sanity and we quit the reckless spread of man-made radiation, we have to live with it to some degree. We can choose better places than others. We can live in a shielded home, whatever. But when we go out, we have to be exposed to it. So you were pointing out how it's a formula, if you will. You need to get restorative sleep. You need to avoid as much of the exposure as you can so that you can go out and be exposed a little bit and you get groceries or whatever. And it's just a continuation. So
Yeah.
there was an awful lot there that I think would be very helpful for people who, and you know what, they may have different symptoms than
Hmm.
you experience, maybe different symptoms than I experienced, but I'll tell you what, I could really resonate with what you were saying about the cognitive difficulties. It's just like your brain's running on molasses or something. Like you no longer have the ability to think and to intuit like you did before. And for me, um, I couldn't listen to a phone number, 7 digits, and then turn and write them down. I just forgot
Hmm.
that quickly, just like your brain's not working well. And I think you had a comment in there about perhaps this is all just becoming normalized. We're all taught to not be wimps and to toughen up. And, it's like that for everybody. But do we all realize what we're giving up for the sake of, and I've tried to quantify this. I think it's three things. And I'd really be interested in your thoughts about this, either now or a future point in time, whatever. I think the whole journey from the telegraph to now, and that's, I don't know how many, almost 200 years now, has all about convenience, amusement, and stimulation of some form or another. And so I wonder whether we're really cognizant as a species
Hmm.
as to how much we're willing to give up for that convenience, amusement, and stimulation via this thing that a lot of people have trouble understanding. So I'll toss that out there.
Yeah,
And
I mean, that is, I think you're right. I think about that a lot as well. Like, because there's this, I think the thing is that these devices are made to be addictive. And once you understand that by design, they're addictive. The exposures to EMFs, actually, there's an addiction element of addiction there, because the frequencies actually kind of give you a lift. They can make you artificially like wake you up, because we're,
cortisol,
yeah,
right? Yeah.
yeah. I mean, there's the dopamine hit, dopamine addiction aspect, but the fields themselves are like energizing. I get kind of hyperactive when I go into town sometimes in stores. I'm suddenly like, woohoo. But it's this artificial stimulus. I mean, it's a stimulus, right? So you're on coffee all day with it or whatever, So what's happening though is a vicious cycle of like burning out your adrenals, because there's the
Mm-hmm.
adrenal part of this is really important. So I think we're all basically dealing with adrenal fatigue and like near collapse. So when you have that, you have this, what they're calling hypersensitivity, right? So I'm also so-called hypersensitive to other poisons like perfumes. So, and it is like, so when you're a low adrenal, right, you can't handle like those exposures. And so it's this vicious cycle of like stimulating and your adrenals and then crashing again, and you're crashing. So like your state without the stimulation is like, you're so tired, and so, and you got to function. And so people don't usually get a chance to actually rest, like really rest, sleep for a few days, even like just sleep, like a
Yeah.
long time. And so help recover that. So it's difficult because it is an addiction. And so to get through to people about it is really hard because, like I said, they're resistant. But it's also, like you said, this convenience. So what I've noticed also with technologies in general, and say, let's talk about sort of industrial revolution and the consequences, is that with every new invention, we have a promise that comes with it. And the promise is always greater ease in your life and leisure time. And has that actually happened? Like, look at what happened with that promise. Like, that's never happened. Everybody now I know works more than they ever did before, more hours, more jobs. Later into life, people don't retire. They can't afford to retire. Most people's complaint is they're too busy. They don't have time. Everybody is lacking time. They don't have time. They definitely don't have time for self-reflection. They don't have time to, talk to their families, to spend time with them. They don't have time to relax. So why don't we should have so much free time now, given like that all these years of, all these things that are supposed to save us time, so we have to kind of look at that, and like that we keep getting tricked, and wake up to that. It's like, this is a trick, this is a trap. You're not going to have more free time. The internet itself is designed to suck your time from you. And I've actually, now that it's really difficult for me to access internet and it's not convenient, I resent the internet. And this is what people should get to. They should hate the internet. You know what I mean? You should start to realize that the internet is robbing you of your time and your short life. And when you get to a certain point in your life and age, like I am, I turned 50 last year. So you start to realize like life is really short. Maybe in your 20s, you don't have that concept yet, or even in your 30s. But when you get to like past 40, you start to think about like how much time you have left and what you can actually achieve in your life. I mean, you might only have a couple decades left. That's nothing. What are you going to do during that time? What are you going to achieve? What could you be doing that you're not doing because of your phone and your internet? Like think about the year. Now it's years. Maybe at first it was hours of your life or whatever. Now it's years of people's lives sucked into that world. They're making a world, a virtual world. They want us in that. They want everything online. I mean, even I know the irony. I understand that we're doing this online and on Zoom and everything.
Right.
But again, compromises and. But I severely restrict, even though I research online and writing books and that, I severely limit my time online. Like I'm so fast when I do my research now and I read articles offline, because reading articles offline is important for me because it's less distracting. So that's a distraction tool. So if you're online, you're going to constantly be like wanting to click on something, right? And thinking about, oh, I could check this and I could check this or whatever. And you can't focus. And again, like we have this, this is this chronic epidemic of like cognitive issues, like you were saying, without, people not being able to focus. There's no way I could have written any books if I had stayed in the city in that electromagnetic soup. No way. It wasn't until years later of like a lot of detox and getting away from it that I could actually think that clearly and organize my thoughts to that degree to be able to write a book and even coherent sentences. I still have some struggle actually where I kind of jumble my sentence structure. I have to like read it over several times sometimes. I'm not completely cured of this, but it's a lot better, and I'm a higher functioning than I was, for sure. But yeah, spending more time away from it will make you realize what you've been missing. I had a friend, it was actually through, I talked to somebody recently on another show. She said she likes to think of it as, people have this acronym now for fear of missing out. And she says, the joy of missing out, she calls it JOMO, so FOMO, so like to appreciate that you're missing out, because what are you missing out on? The drama, the rumors, the gossip, the intrigue, all the like just the depressing news. Like everything is depressing, and it's traumatic and it's violent, and and you're stressed to the max every time you look at any news article or a social media post. Like you're caring about missing out on that. So it's just like our perspectives everything's so distorted now. But you're right. Anyway, back to that idea of like, yeah, we're constantly giving up. What have we given up? Since even like the telegraph, like it's what we've given up is in-person contact and real connection with other people and with animals and with the natural world. I'm sure people even complained at the time when they were getting telegrams instead of somebody coming by, or even like a foot messenger with a note or something, because that means, at least when somebody writes you a note, like they sat down and they took a pen and an actual object from the physical world with a piece of paper that came from a tree or hemp or whatever, and wrote on it, and something from them is on that note, like some essence of that person, like their character, it comes out in the letters, like there's something there, right? And then that person takes the message to your friend down the road or whatever and says, do you want to have lunch later? I mean, I'm really, obviously I'm getting back, like going back in time a lot here. But, I do read like 19th century literature still. Sometimes I enjoy it because you get to see what that was like, and understand what people, and what I always notice when I read those books is that people felt their time obviously was different and went more slowly, because a year in a book like that was a long time for people. They would say, I haven't seen this person in a year,
Right.
a full year, or like it's been months, and a
Yeah.
lot happens in a day. Like they just have a lot of time, like they have so much time. And why? It doesn't make sense to us that if people were engaging in manual labor and handwriting notes to people and had to hook up horses and buggies, like to get and like go to places in a horse and like light lamps, and candles, like why did they have so much time? So why do they have so much time? Because they didn't have TV, they didn't have movies, they didn't have video games, they didn't have texting. Now we're connected with thousands of people in some cases. I don't do that, but if you're on social media, whatever. But these connections are so shallow and unfulfilling, and they're competitive, and so we're all feeling this emptiness in us of like we're so unhappy. It's like we're, because of that disconnection, it's like you can find happiness like sitting in nature and listening to birds singing and playing with your cat, that is so much more rewarding than like, I don't know, some dopamine hit you get artificially with a game or with a text or whatever, and we have to be aware of the traps that we are vulnerable, that we have vulnerabilities inherent to us as people, and it's fine. Like it's not really a weakness. You just have to understand it's a vulnerability and it's exploited. So your need for connection with somebody is exploited, and to the point where like you fall for like flattery, be aware of like things like that, things that are trying to flatter you and raise you up, and like, and like what's really, what's more important than that? We have to reprioritize and get back to like basic values and what is really like makes us happy in life, and understanding that our lives are short, and how do we want to be spending them really, so I don't know if that's answer. I kind of went on there, but
Oh my gosh,
yeah.
I love it, Miss. This is so much fun. So I just want to touch on some of the things I was able to write down while you were speaking about that. This really resonated with me. You were talking about the life of ease that was promised to us, beginning with the Industrial Revolution. And you didn't mention this, but I think you're probably aware. What was promised with the Industrial Revolution is that we were going to have much more time to live our lives and to be with our families.
Right.
And a lot has happened since then. Like it takes more people in a family working to maintain an ever decreasing style of living. And I think it's wonderful that you're able to connect that occurrence and that happening even into the present with, this sort of Faustian bargain that we've made to have greater convenience through electromagnetic things. The technology robbing you of your time. Everybody is so quick to say, I'm not against technology, or I think the internet is a wonderful thing. But what you just said is absolutely true. These things, it's called a web for a reason, because you get stuck in it.
Yeah, and a net, internet and a web, World Wide Web.
Yeah, right, exactly.
Yeah.
So it's actually robbing us of our time and attention and ability. You just intimated that it took you years to recover your cognitive abilities. I know it has taken me years to recover what I have, and I don't feel like I'm all the way where I need to be. You mentioned your friend with the joy of missing out. I love that so much. And I just have to mention as an aside, so I've shot photography for 20 years as well. And I don't know if you have this experience or not as a photographer, but when you're looking through the lens at an event and you're capturing the event, have you ever gone back and then had a loved one tell you, do you remember thus and such? And you say, not really. Well, you were there. Okay.
Yeah.
So
Actually, I was going to say that I thought I knew you're getting to at because I experienced that a lot. It's actually why I got out of photography because I felt I was always watching life and not participating in it.
Right.
Especially when I got into documentary work. And then I was a wedding photographer for a long time, and I would be at these weddings and not enjoying them at all. And it, you
Yeah.
know,
Yeah. Yeah.
and everybody else having a good time. And it was just like even war protests, anti-war protests, I wanted to be out there with them. I'm like, I'm just standing there and taking pictures. I mean, I know I'm contributing in this way, but it felt like I'm not participating.
Right. Right.
And a lot of now everybody's taking pictures because, and it's sad because it removes you from what you're experiencing. And I do still love to take pictures
Yes.
for certain reasons. I take a lot of pictures of seals. We have seals in the town here and sea lions, and then I paint them later. So I love that. And and I also spend time just watching them, because I'm not under pressure to like, to like record an event or something. And but I just get sad. I see tourists and they have to document everything they do and all their experiences. And what happens is not only are you not fully engaged in your environment at the time, is you're thinking about what the reaction online is going to be to your post.
Right. Right.
So you're already
Yeah.
posturing, you're already not living an authentic life.
Yeah.
It's so damaging. I mean, I'm not saying never take pictures of things, but it's so excessive now.
Right.
Do something in your life and have a good time without photographing and documenting it and posting it. Just that, I'll challenge listeners with that, just alone. If you do that, that'll be amazing.
Right. Right. And it's really a cybernetic feedback loop. And you're
Yeah.
talking about how somebody, and this just amazes me. I think I would be one of these people had I not been made deathly ill from EMF poisoning, because I was a smartwatch wearing, smartphone toting, Wi-Fi using modern guy. And I am sure I'd be doing the same things. But because I've been poisoned in this way, and because I've had to change my course and heading, I don't really regret it at all. And I'm able to take a different view, and I see people living their life through that device, and they're wanting to film everything instead of experience it. And I feel like as a photographer, I know where that's going to go. It's going to lead to inauthentic experiences, and this dopamine driven response cycle where you're thinking about the post because you want to get the thumbs up because you get a little dopamine hit from that, right?
Exactly. And it's also the other really dangerous thing is the lack of empathy that's happening from it. So when you detach yourself like that and you just become an observer, like two examples. One, a friend told me in Australia, like there was a guy, he saw this happen. He was on the beach and he saw these tourists, and they were Chinese, I think. And like the guy was like, his kid went in the water, and then he was trying to get on some floaty device they had, and then he starts struggling in the waves, and then the wife goes in to try to help him, and the father is filming it. His wife and kid are like possibly drowning, and instead of going to rescue them, he's just documenting it, and so
right.
And this other example is terrible. I just read it in Digital Madness, and the author, he wrote Flow Kids. Nicholas, I'm not sure how to say his last name, Kadaris or something. So yeah, I gave him an example of a rape that was happening in a subway train or a commuter train where at least a couple people recorded it with their phones.
Oh my gosh.
And the thing is, it was like
and
this person was harassing the woman for like a long time before it happened, and nobody stopped it. And they filmed it. I mean, this is what we're looking at, a complete, degenerative, like just the collapse of society, really. I mean, this is like the potential that this technology holds, is to completely destroy our real social network, our actual, like, our human kindness. I mean, it's just robbing us of empathy and of these, I mean, so many profound, important aspects of what I think it means to be human. And so it's dehumanizing. So
isn't that true? Isn't that true? Yeah. And you mentioned a little while ago this idea of really enjoying the time, because time is the only currency we have in this life, right? That's uniquely yours, and you get to decide where and how to spend it. So it is not accidental that we have these technologies that are trying to steal that from us
Hmm.
with no return. But you know, that this whole discussion begs the question: if you could go back, would you?
If
And
I could go,
what I
oh,
mean
sorry.
what I mean by that is, you know, you have this life before
Hmm.
you were forced to flee, or you decided to
Hmm.
flee, before you met all these other people who had been damaged in the same way, before you lived apart from technology for the majority of time and only used it sparingly, and it gave you insights before you regained your cognitive, you know,
Hmm.
abilities and were able to write books.
Yeah,
Would you go back to that life that you had before if you could?
absolutely not. That's the thing. What's interesting about this whole journey is that for a long time I'd wanted to get out of cities, and I always found excuses to stay. And it was mostly financial, which makes sense. You're like, well, I have jobs here. It's also social. I have friends or I have my family, had a lot of reasons for staying that I kept coming up with. But I hate it. In a lot of ways, I hated it. I hated the noise. I hated the pollution. I hated the stress. Um, and it got more and more unpleasant as technology kind of took hold on people because of aggressive drivers, this road rage. I had people, I thought I was going to get killed a couple times because of road rage, happening around me. It was scary. One guy, anyway, I won't get into that, but there was that, and then there was my friends who weren't available to meet in person anymore because they were too busy spending time on Facebook. They live around the corner from me, like 2 blocks away, and they didn't have time to see me in person. And it was really becoming isolating already and lonely. So, and then of course with the recent unpleasantness in the last couple of years,
Yeah.
who wants to live in a city? It's like not really, the good aspects are just gone. That's been kind of taken away, even as people have like recovered from the last couple of years or so. Um, Not so fun anymore, right? So I love living in wilderness, not having neighbors. And I tell you, when I tell other people we don't have neighbors, they are all envious. Everybody kind of goes, oh, yeah, it would be awesome. It's hard too. The first year we were here, we didn't have any year and a half, no plumbing. We didn't even have access to the spring, wasn't connected yet. We had to carry water from the creek. We have to heat the home with wood that, my partner mostly chops, for me. But, that's like half the year at least that we're heating with the wood. We, you know, the nearest town that isn't even a town, it's a post office, is like, 40-minute drive. And then the actual town that's not a very big town is an hour's drive. We have to, we got shut in for 3 weeks with a snowstorm. It's like there's rough aspects, and maybe it's not for everybody, but luckily my partner's also always been kind of an outdoor type. So we like it, and it was hard, although even for him it was like it happened in kind of baby steps to come to this point. He was like a little nervous about living in an isolated way at first, in terms of, it's not, that's the thing, we both discovered it's not isolating. What we have it all backwards. Like, living in nature is not isolating. You have company with all the nature creatures. We actually like felt like that was company. Like in Arizona, there was a lot of wildlife, and to us, like the javelina coming through and eating our compost, and seeing the road runners, on the path, or the rabbits, and even like occasional cougar, or bear, or they were kind of like our family. And it was really hard to leave because I felt like I was leaving behind this family, that we got to know, got close to. And so, I feel for myself that I get a lot less attached to being in a city and like my city block and my building than I do when I've lived in natural places and had to move again, because I feel attached. You get rooted and attached to the natural world around you because it's living. It's a living entity. Um, And you do, and when you're in small communities, you get to know your neighbors. Maybe you don't always like them, but you help each other out, and they're there. And you have more people are less reserved. They're actually you can make friends a little more easily. I think you talk when I go to our small town. I people always Sam laughs because he's like, I need to go to town more often. People just come up to me and start talking to me and telling me their life stories.
Yeah.
Like they really open up,
Right.
and
Yep.
because I'm there without a device, I'm not holding a phone,
Mhm.
I'm making eye contact, and I have there's an opening. And so they're like, oh, they see the opening and go, oh, somebody to talk to who's going to listen to me and not be distracted looking at their phone the whole time. It's so rude. It was rude to start with, and people recognized that at the beginning of that phenomenon. But it's worse now. It's still rude. It's still rude to look at your phone when you're talking to somebody.
Right.
Like
Right.
to let it beep or whatever. Why do you have to answer the beep? People are like a slave to the beep, and it's a conditioning tool. They've done this, I mean, years ago, 40s or 50s, mind control experiments using sound conditioning. It's Pavlov started this. Pavlov's dog experiment with salivation and the bell and food.
Mhm.
This has been done with humans too, and with babies. I mean, this is like well studied and researched. This is why they're able to make devices that are addictive, because they know how it works. A sound, you associate the sound with the reward. They've
Right.
done it with rats. See like you said, the reward is the dopamine hit. So you hear the sound and you know that hit is coming, and you have to respond to the sound though in order to get that hit. So, people cannot resist responding to it. And they're just trained like Pavlov's dogs.
Yes.
I mean,
Yes. Yeah.
that's what we're looking at.
Yeah. No. So many things that you said there are just great. What one point I would like to make is people might think that not people who've been damaged like us,
Yeah.
but anybody else who's watching this, you may not be able to track the conversation here.
That's true.
Part of the danger of living in your smartphone is while you're caressing that thing and bowing down to it and getting your thumbs ups and sending your emails and you're looking at your stock reports and whatever, every interaction costs you something. Um, there's this brilliant researcher up in Canada, Magda Havas. Maybe
Oh,
you're
yeah.
familiar with her work. And
Yeah.
she published a paper, and she refers to electromagnetic poisoning as accelerated aging. And I think that's a brilliant way of looking at it because the damage being done by RF radiation in particular, but all forms of non-native EMF, the damage that's being done is at the cellular level. So if you can have a device that's destructive to your life and you make it addictive, then that just increases your dose, by every time, at every interaction, even having it turned on in your presence, the Wi-Fi, etc.
Yeah.
So we have our time is flying
Whoa.
here. Let me ask you, because I want to talk about your book. I really want to encourage people that this book is an important read. I read a lot of books. I don't like all the books that I read. I loved your book. It was very well written, and I want people to have the opportunity to experience it. I wonder if you could tell us about. So it's brilliant. The beginning of it, you're talking about your own personal journey, and you touched on some of those things. I need to emphasize some of those things because there's 100 more things about your journey that we just didn't have time to talk about that are interesting and helpful for people who have been poisoned in this way to see other people struggling with. But then you go on and you chronicle the experiences of other people, and you have really quite a number of different people that you profile. So people who have been poisoned, I think, will find that helpful to see over and over and over and over again how, oh, I am experiencing something. Yes, my family abandoned me. My goodness, they didn't understand why I didn't come to the family reunion or whatever. Seeing that in the lives of other people, I think is tremendously helpful. I wonder if you would just take the time to share the profile with Amy that you met while you were sojourning in the desert.
Yeah.
So,
Yeah. She was,
and you, yeah, go ahead.
yeah. Well, she was my, this was amazing because we landed in this, remote spot in a desert in Arizona because of, not the lack of cell towers there, basically. And we came to this community and we met, and it was like, that it was more of a close-knit community there. They had a community center and, like very focused on like neighbors helping each other and that. So we were excited to like meet people after we moved there, and we went to they called it coffee hour or something on Wednesday mornings, and because a lot of farmers there, so they could actually like decide like Wednesday we'll meet at 10 or whatever. And so we go there, and we first met Amy's husband, but like I'm telling him like why we moved there, and his eyes getting bigger and bigger. And I thought like at first he thought I was going to say I was crazy, but instead he's like, my wife has that, and I'm like, what? So I got to meet her. Well, their story, that family, they're from Missouri, and they had a farm there. They still actually have the farm there. They've been able to maintain it with other help, back in Missouri, but they moved, they up, 7 kids. moved to Arizona because she also was suffering with like severe, they call it MCS, multiple chemical another sensitivity label, right? So she was really hit with both pretty bad, and in terms of she thought they thought she was going to die. Like they were basically saying goodbye to her at one point. I mean, her daughter gave this testimony when we were trying to fight the smart meters. I almost said fart because I'm trying to say fight and smart.
Right.
The fart meters, which they could more accurately be called.
Yeah, right.
But she told of how her oldest daughter told of how she was really so sick that they were just thought she wasn't going to make it, and it was only because they found a place to move her to. They actually had to hire like a private jet, and I mean just to get her there, it was very expensive, but they had to turn off all the electricity in their house in the winter, and she couldn't even like handle all the clothes had so many smells on them. She had like one t-shirt she was living in with like the heat off, in the winter, like freezing and like but she was having seizures. So she was having like these constant mini seizures from the smart meter. So it became life threatening. So they just did all they could. I mean, they've done so much. So they moved, they bought property. They found this property because also the low EMF, but also because it was a, like MCS friendly house. So like low, no VOCs. That's volatile organic compounds for people who don't know. Off-gassing, you could think of it that way, of chemicals. So it was a chemical-free home, and they then started farm there, which is a lot more difficult in Arizona than it is in Missouri. I'll tell you that much. But they're just like go-getter. They're like a hardworking family. Like these people, they're Christians, hardworking, the salt of the earth type of, And then they had to move too. Had only moved there a year before us, and the smart meters came in, and luckily we heard about it in advance. They were going to do it a sneak attack, and then we bought it, and we got them to delay it a year. That's all we could get. They wouldn't even do an opt-out or anything, and at the end of it all, we were going to have to get lawyers, and it was too expensive. And so we tried. I can tell you, we tried everything. We definitely fought that. And she really fought it. She spearheaded that, did tons of research. I mean, the thing is, what happens when you're trying to fight this is you have to watch out, because you could kill yourself in the process. It can be really damaging, physically, emotionally, take a toll, too much of a toll. Like in the end, it's like, it's better to find somewhere else and move again sometimes. I'm not saying that we don't do that, but we need able-bodied people to fight that for us. I think people who are suffering and really sick shouldn't be the ones doing it. You're not going to get better, and so they moved to the north, some hours to the north. And I mean, they're so amazing because you looked at this piece of land they bought was like real. I mean, we were in the desert already, but it was somewhat of an oasis. There was like, there was some plant life there and trees, and where they moved was like, wow, just like sand, sand dunes. And they've made an oasis out of it because there's an aquifer there, and they got the water out, and they're farming again, and they built their homes. And I mean, every time they're sending pictures, I'm like, how did you guys do this already? Like in a couple of years, they've got like a greenhouse. Now they've got the big greenhouse. They're, growing their food. And so she's doing a lot better there too, as it happens, because we were also dealing with wind turbines not too far. that in the infrasound can travel through mountains 15 miles away. And that's destructive. And that actually, a lot of people have insomnia from that who wouldn't call themselves electrosensitive, don't know that that's connected. So I think it's been better for my health too, that we moved. Sometimes these things happen are good for you. I mean, it's hard to see it at the time, but like sometimes like, one door closes, another opens, and it's actually like there's some providence or something out there that's leading you, if you're open to it and you have a goal and you're focused on, that'll help open doors for you. And maybe you can't see at the time how it's going to work out and it doesn't seem possible, but I can tell you it's possible, because like everything time it seemed like something was closing for us, something else opened that's actually been better. So be open to that, because you never know. I mean, and you can't see the whole thing ahead, right? We can't see that. So you take it step at a time, and you're open to, you're saying, I need this, and you're asking, and you're being receptive, and you're being open to ideas, just like, don't get it, if you get it into your mind that you need like XYZ and it has to be actual, like a certain way, then you're going to have a hard time. Again, there's always going to be a little bit of a compromise. So you're probably not going to find anything totally pristine, or even if you do, maybe it's not somewhere you can live for other reasons. Maybe it's just too harsh of a climate, I mean, because I know people have had to live out of their, cars and in rough weather, where that's taken a toll on their health too. So yeah, but yeah, she's a real fighter, and she's doing pretty good. I mean, but they've had, they're off grid now. So, and that's what we ended up finding as a solution, is to be totally off grid. And there's challenges with off grid living, because as you know, with your line of work, the inverters can cause a lot of EMF problems. So you need to understand those things. You can't just think that because you go off grid, you're going to solve your problems, especially if you have neighbors with like generators. Those generators are nasty. They're horrible with the EMFs. So you could go from the frying pan into the fire if you're not careful. And so you want to make sure you understand what's involved with off-grid living, where that's happening, who the neighbors are, what kind of sources of energy are they using, how are they using it. It's just, so I can't say it's always better off-grid, or always, it just depends, because some people can find a way to be in town and be okay, and depending on what options they have. Sometimes out in the countryside's worse, because you're right next to all the towers that are on the mountain and you're not shielded from them. Power lines, the huge like high tension power lines, those also were in our valley. So it was a compromise actually in Arizona. I'm not saying it was perfect at all, because we had the high tension power lines that were a little close for comfort, and we had dirty electricity problems in the house, I think, because of that. And we had the electric meters rather than smart meters, which were also a problem. We filtered, and the filters helped a lot. I don't think we could have done better with filters. I'm sure you have better solutions than what we used probably. But we also had a budget too, so we couldn't afford like the best kind of in the whole in-home meter system on the inline one, I think it's called. But we'd use the Graham Stetzer ones, and those were really helpful. I did end up sleeping outside most of the time in Arizona, though, because I still had trouble sleeping in the house, even though we turned off the breakers. We couldn't turn off all of them. We had the refrigerator and that. So I slept in a variety of different things that we made like to try. I called them sleep huts. The last one was like the best sleep hut, but I tried tents, and they didn't stand up to the elements. We were in a really harsh environment, and desert is a hard place to live. I don't necessarily recommend it. It's really hard. I mean, but beautiful. And there was a lot of great, experiences we had and things we learned, and things that, again, it's like these other opportunities opened up, and there's a lot of, I think there's things that we've experienced that people don't get to when you have to be resourceful, and you also have more time on your hands because you're not sucked into the web and you're not, spending your time that way. I mean, my partner got into making bowls, like wooden bowls, and he was selling those, and we got into making more music. I got into, painting and writing children's books. I sewed my own tents out of canvas,
Oh,
And I, made quilts with apoca wool that I washed and dried myself and stuffed. And, you know, just so many, like, and this is what people used to do. They live
right, right,
off the land. You sound like you had this one job and this one specialty. Like you were just a person who had a lot of interest in a lot of things you could do. So if we live like that, then you're more fulfilled, and you're not searching for that. You don't need that dopamine hit, because you're spending your time engaging in things that you're doing with your own hands. You're creating things, and you get to see the result of that. And that is a lot more fulfilling than say getting a high score in a game. Like
right,
that's
right.
not something. What did you actually create there? You didn't create anything. It's trying to replace that feeling of like that need that you think you have. You do have that need. You have that need to create, but this is an artificial replacement for that. It's not fulfilling it. So it's just you're always going to feel unsatisfied somehow with that. Is what I'm getting at.
Yeah, I completely agree with you. That
Yeah.
desire, I think, to create something is within all of us. And what you just said about being given a replacement for that that's not productive, it seems like every replacement we're being offered is not
Yeah.
as good as the real thing. But I'm kind of looking at the time here, and
Okay. Sorry. Yeah.
I can't. No, it's okay.
Yeah.
I would love to go on, but we should probably. I'd like to make some closing comments here,
Okay.
and I would love to have you back. Maybe we
Yeah.
can talk about blue light and earthing and sunlight
Yeah, I was gonna say we
exposure
didn't
and
really
things
get
like that.
into the solutions I'd like to talk about, like with like physical, things you can do to help.
Well,
So yeah.
are you up to keep going now? Do you want
Oh yeah,
to?
I could. Yeah, yeah. I
Okay.
didn't know how long you had. We didn't. I don't remember even talking about how long you wanted to do this for.
Okay, so here's what we'll do is I'm going to
Okay.
break it up into 2 episodes. So I'll
Okay.
just give a little close here, but you and I'll keep going, and then I'll
Okay.
divide that up into two
Sounds
episodes.
good.
So um yeah, so I want to encourage people to listen to the next part of this episode. We want to get into solutions a bit, and there is an appendix in the book called Appendix A. It's all about solutions. And I'm particularly interested in one thing that comes through very loud and clear is stopping non-native EMF exposure and embracing the natural EMF exposures. But there's a whole lot more than that in there. So I really want to encourage people to get the book. I'm going to show it to you one more time. It's called Wi-Fi Refugee, Plight of the Modern Day Canary. The author's name is Shannon Rowan. And I'd really encourage people to pick it up. It's really a book worth reading. So, Shannon, thank you so much for being with us today,
You're
and I really
welcome.
appreciate
It's
your
been
time.
great. All right. Thank you.